My word, we have a ton of numbers here today. We've got recall numbers, we've got approval ratings, we've got television ratings, and we got a big old number right here to begin with because the preliminary census data is out and the national population for the United States is growing at a glacial pace. There's no better way to explain it, and we'll get to that shortly. But as you can see, the headline on the screen, US Census hands House seats to Republican strongholds, Texas, Florida, couple other states. Montana's getting another one. We'll head down everything that we reported on. Oh gosh, it's about a month or two ago when all of this speculation was coming out of why New York and places like that, they're just hemorrhaging citizens at the moment. That might end up costing them congressional seats. That turned out to be 100% the case. In fact, New York is losing some. Pennsylvania, California is losing one for the first time in their history. They haven't grown during a census. And we're not going to know until September what the shakedown, which seats are going to be lost. So it's going to be interesting. That's going to make these midterms coming up even more hectic. And I sense that probably the campaigning and the election season is going to be fucking bonkers, even in comparison to 2018. But let's parse through the census data that we have here. I know it's all very, very exciting, but it's nice to not have to talk about somebody getting shot. At least today, there's supposed to be some body cam footage coming out from a guy. All we have is speculation right now in North Carolina. I'll just briefly go over it because if we got to talk about it tomorrow, we got to talk about it tomorrow, right? Body cam footage of somebody getting stopped for an arrest warrant and then he was driving away and he got shot. That's all we know so far, and it's a black guy, and Ben Crump's involved because it is a day that ends in Y. But to the article and these numbers at hand. Texas, Florida, and North Carolina are among the states that will gain congressional seats based on new population data from the United States Census, a shift that could boost Republican chances of recapturing House representatives from Democrats in next year's midterm elections. It's weird how it's just kind of right around the corner, hey? But first and foremost, the overall population stood at 331,449,281. Wow, everybody was thinking upwards of maybe 350, 360, but just a shade over 330. Oof. But the reason that's probably, well, it's most certainly a lowball, is because there's a little related article over there in the corner. The gist of that one is, that was when the Supreme Court ruled at the end of 2020 that illegal immigrants cannot be polled in the census. Okay, they cannot contribute to the overall United States population because they don't really have the right to vote unless they know the right people and hop on the right bus. So yeah, that's just all people that are legally here right now. That is only a 7.4% increase over 2010. Think of all the crazy shit that has happened between 2010 and 2020, and that's just odd. That's just really, really insane. I'd just like to know like a rough calculation of what the illegal immigration would be, just to see what the difference is. But it's nice, all of the flight out of these Democratic strongholds, your New Yorks, your Californias, they're paying dividends for other states. Some of them are a little bit hard to figure out. Some of them make sense why they're getting more seats, and other ones are, a little bit more difficult to figure out why they are losing seats, but we'll get to that shortly. Under the United States Constitution, the 435 seats in the House and the votes in the Electoral College that select the president every 4 years are divided among the 50 states based on population, with every state receiving at least one congressional seat. And districts also receiving representation, hence why there's a representative from D.C., as long as it stays just the capital itself and not turned into the 51st state. It's not going to happen. Guam, the Virgin Islands, Wyoming. I think there's 2 seats in Hawaii, but I can't be bothered to check it up, but I know that those places at least have one officially. The seats are reallocated every 10 years following the decennial census count. Yes, the shift in seats reflects broader population trends that have seen the South and West grow more rapidly than the Northeast and Northwest for decades. I wonder why that would be. Not hard to figure out. Texas will receive 2. They are the biggest benefactors of this. Depending on where the new seats are going to be could determine if it's simply just people fleeing from California, people fleeing from New York, Ohio, Michigan, reallocating themselves in larger city Texas, and then it's just whatever, a transplant from another district ending up sitting in the exact same seat. It might not amount to anything, but we'll have to see once everything shakes out, like I said, at the end of September. So the other benefactors in this, Colorado, Montana, and Oregon. Really, the only one that kind of stands out there is Oregon. Colorado makes sense. Californians have been fleeing there for a very long time. Montana, yeah, people trying to flee from Washington, from the Midwest, from Oregon itself. And then, I don't know, I didn't think Portland was really gaining that much steam, or even the rest of greater Oregon. That one's kind of a head scratcher. And then on the losing side of this, New York, California, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia each lose one seat. 6 out of the 7 make sense, okay? Ohio you can kind of explain away because even though they voted, nearly 10% Republican in the previous presidential election, their economy has been fairly stagnant prior to 2016. A lot of people have been leaving there. And same with Pennsylvania. But West Virginia, maybe that's the exact same way, even though these places, Ohio and West Virginia, are rather Republican. Pennsylvania is weird because there is still Philadelphia after all. California, yes, the first time in their 170-year history that they're going to be down one congressional seat. It goes to show you what one-party rule does for things, and I suppose we'll probably clean up what the fuck the aftermath of the recall is going to be with the final video of the day. Spoiler, I suppose. The reappropriation mint can come down to razor-thin margins in New York. Oh, if New York had 89 more people in the census count, somebody should have just filled in their census paper and sent them in on time. Sucks to suck. For instance, it would have kept its seat at the expense of Minnesota. So Minnesota would have been down one, and New York would have all of their wonderful seats. God, one could only hope that it's the 17th district in New York. I think you know exactly who that is. 3 little letters and 3 little brain cells. So in talking about the reappropriation of the different House seats, a little bit of bickering back and forth. It's like, oh, Republicans have engaged in gerrymandering in the past. So have Democrats, so what the fuck's your point? It's a political process. It's dirty. It sucks. You get it. But like I said before, the work itself cannot be completed until the census releases more precise block-by-block data, which is slated for September. The delay has raised concerns that states will be forced to rush through the complicated process. How? You got fucking 5 months. Stop being such queers if masks work so good. You shouldn't have anything to fear. You can go out there and start knocking on doors, figuring out if anybody's there. That's what all these concerns about are anyways. United States Supreme Court in 2019 ruled the federal courts have no power to redistrict political gerrymandering, although racial gerrymandering, be afraid there's that racial component to it, which aims to curb the political power of specific racial and ethnic groups, I'm sure. This is also a Reuters repost on the Epoch Times, so this is where all this fucking moronic rhetoric comes from. Remains unlawful. The four most populous states, Texas, Florida, and New York, along with California, have more than 110 million residents combined and will allow about 1/3 of House seats. Except for California is still far and away the biggest single dump of electoral college votes. Then I think it's Texas, and then it's New York. Florida's important, but at least there's a nice line drawn, in the meantime at least, between Texas and Florida and New York and California. So yeah, that's the graph there. No real surprises, I suppose. That's all what it was looking like beforehand. You had a pretty decent mix, I suppose, of states that are Democratic, losing House seats. And a couple of them, Colorado is the only one that's Colorado and Oregon, the only ones that are gaining, that are traditional Democrat strongholds. Everywhere else just kind of makes sense. But what about the overall population? Because that one just kind of stuck out like a stiff prick in a whorehouse. Overall, the United States population grew more slowly from 2010 to 2020 than in every other decade aside from the 30s. Some questions need to be answered. Population growth has slowed as birth rates continued to decline. And then try to blame it on boomers for getting too old? Okay. In addition, immigration sharply decreased due to the hardline policies of the Trump administration. Now, I think I'd focus more on that whole birth rate thing. So one thing that I'll give props for China for is trying to ban all online discussion of feminism. because not enough people are fucking. But specific places that are growing, so Utah grew by 18% in the decade prior. 3 states lost population, West Virginia, which saw its population decrease by 3.2%. Illinois and Mississippi also dropped by minuscule percentage points. Washington, D.C. grew by 14.6%. You love to see the federal government in action. House Democrats have passed legislation, yes, to make it the 51st states, because pretty much everybody that works there works for the federal government and therefore would continue to vote at the same clip that they have for literally ever, right around that 80% mark. So yeah, that's the brief on the census data. So until September, when we figure out which districts are going to be added and which ones are going to be taken away from the different states, not much more to say on it. The population growth is a little bit concerning. What you can grab from it is the propaganda over the past 10 years to disincentivize the nuclear family. Seems to be working. I'll have to see what 2030 produces. But how about some more numbers? How about some approval ratings? How about the president's approval rating? Kamala Harris has a lower approval rating than Mike Pence in first 100 days. I didn't know that they actually tallied this one. I didn't even think Mike Pence really needed an approval rating. I don't know anything prior to him heading up the COVID task force, anything that he actually did. Probably hopped on a plane once or twice to go give a speech and meet with some world leaders. Nothing to the extent that Kamala Harris has done. She's in every single picture and every single speech that I've ever seen Biden give. She's normally stage left or stage right. She's right there just to make sure that Biden stays on point. I don't think that she's doing a very good job, and people would tend to agree with you on that one. Vice President Kamala Harris, it's so nice that they're keeping up appearances right now, has a lower approval rating than former Vice President Mike Pence by 1 point. Woo! In their respective first 100 days in office. When a Fox News poll asked, yeah, okay, it's a Fox News poll, so at least it's the same type of people that they're polling, and the fact that Pence only had a 50% approval rating in April of 2017 compared to Harris's 49 at the same point, that should tell you something. One, that people don't respect the office of the vice president, and even if you start putting people front and center, and really kudos to Breitbart for putting that picture right there. Not one of her in front of the vice president's podium, but, her ascendant throne. I think that speaks volumes. And this has got to be at least a little bit of a shock, unless their internal polling shows something completely different. But Kamala Harris is not that popular, okay? And there's even a big bunch graph out there right now for the 2024 presidential election. We'll keep talking about that because it's fairly relevant. She would be leading the pack in 2024 if Biden were not to run again. And she only has 1/3 of support, and then the rest of it is just a bunch of also-rans. She's not popular. As it says here, despite being one of the first serious contenders to drop out of the Democratic primary before being tapped for vice president, Harris was tasked by President Joe Biden with handling the southern border crisis, an issue upon which, according to the Fox News poll, the president has a weighty 34% approval rating of. And she also ducked out of the primaries with less than 1%. Nobody liked her then. People either forget that she's in the position she is right now, which I don't think that should be many people, and they also don't like what she is doing, mostly because it's just cackling and pulling strings behind the scenes. And whose strings is she pulling behind the scenes? Well, that would be Biden's, of course. Now we got some poll data from him. 82% of the United States is divided, despite Biden's promise to be more unifying president. Yeah, I think this one's fairly obvious, but at the same time, there's popularity polls, there's approval rating polls right now that are saying Joe Biden is at a 60% clip. This dude is wildly popular. Remember, 81 million votes couldn't be wrong. The vast majority of the United States adults still believe the country is divided despite President Joe Biden's vow for unity, man. An NBC News poll released Sunday revealed. I don't know if they're trying to undercut him in order to ascend Kamala for 47. I'm not too sure, but it seems like they're trying to do what they can, okay? Whenever Biden goes off script, they'll say that's not the official state or the official stance of the White House. They're trying to create this sort of association with Biden, but they don't want to quite hitch their wagon to this elderly horse that just tends to do circles in a field all day. He's just going to be the face for all the radical policies for the first 2 years, and then just kind of sunset himself and just be like, okay, peace out after the midterms. I'm thinking that's probably a little bit more likely, but he's also stubborn enough to just continue and march forward, because he says that he thinks of himself as the two-term president. He'd be about the only person. But he's always just been, that other guy in the race. Like in 88 when he first ran, okay? He was there. He wasn't quite at the top. He wasn't as popular as Walter Mondale. He was there. He was in the mix. And then in 2008, he was there. More popular than Kamala in the same sense in the primary races. And then he dropped off. And then he was thrown as just this kind of inoffensive, unless you hear him speak, just ineffective, bumbling asshole who just kind of knows how Washington works. He can fucking show Barack the ropes, and yeah, vice president, he's not very threatening. And they'll just use him as a face to push their radical policies. It might work. It might end up being the plan. Who knows? And then just try to groom Kamala as their face because she's the heir apparent to the Clinton throne. That's at least the way I see it. But let's dig into this poll before we end this video. The poll, released on the cusp of Biden's first 100 days in office. 100 days will be on Thursday, I do believe. Revealed just more than a third of, 36% say the country is heading in the right direction. Meanwhile, the vast majority of respondents, 82% youth, believe the country is divided. 36% of people think that it's headed in the right direction. Depending on the way that they worded that, some people, if they're using landlines as well, need their hearing aid turned up. Is like, no, I hate the right. We're not in that direction. Could be skewed. This comes amid Biden's vow to unify the country with his presidency, man, making the theme central to his inaugural address, and was swiftly forgotten in January. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul, and to secure the future of America requires more than words. That's all we got, though, so I guess we're going to try with that. It requires the most elusive of things in a democracy. Unity. Well, it's not working, Joe. And you're not really fooling anybody. An NBC News poll, something that should be very biased towards you and your party, is saying 36% of people are with you. They're with Joe. They're riding with Biden. 82% of people think that you aren't really following through on your central theme of unity. Nobody's following along with your themes. Nobody's buying your vice president as being somebody who could be viable in the big chair. Like, if you can't convince people, she's pretty much the face. Like, you guys changed all of your wording, all of your letterheads. Read the Biden-Harris administration, because this is the Democrats. They definitely want Kamala there front and center. They're looking at you like a placeholder. That's all it is. Your time's up. You should have ran in 2016. I understand your family situation was a little bit sketchy at the time. Could have been better. But this is the hole that party's dug themselves in. They realized that their crop of up-and-comers, their primary crop, yielded a rotten haul. There's not a lot there, okay? What, butt gig? All he's proven so far is that he's a total radical. Andrew Yang, same path, except for he's going to go be mayor of New York City, because that place just can't get enough stupidity. Elizabeth Warren, she'll be practically as old as Biden by the time 2024 rolls around. Sanders, same thing. Even though I would still love to see him up on those podiums, just visibly wilting away, even more hunched over and just fucking waving his arms as far as they'll go above his head. There's just nothing there. And no up-and-comers reasonable enough, centrist enough to win a general election. Unless, of course, they're successful in doing what they do. You can't tell me that the squad, any member of them, would be electable on a national stage. It's just not possible. So yeah, I think that they're starting to realize, the Democrats, that their positions are not going to be sustainable. This could be their last chance at doing anything. They're just going to try to ram through everything as quickly as possible, because their reigns over the years are definitely coming back to bite them in the ass. Look at the states that are losing people. 6 out of the 7 Democratic strongholds, at least for the longest portion of the 2010s. And you think that that's going to continue? You think that trend is going to magically reverse? People are going to start moving back and flocking back into California and New York? Not fucking highly likely on the trajectory they're on. This is a slippery slope, man, and they greased it with their terrible, terrible policies a long time ago. Now those chickens have come home to roost. Now we got to talk about something perhaps a little bit lighter, shall we? This has been kind of a longer video than intended to be, but hey, sometimes them the breaks when we're talking about numbers, I suppose. Well, now we got to talk about TV numbers, and a lot of people have talked about this, but hopefully I can offer a little bit different of a perspective. With that said, I thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.